Hello, I'm R.A. Spratt, and I want to welcome people joining us this week on the Yoto podcast platform. Now, just so you know, most of the bedtime stories I tell here are standalone stories. But over the last year, we have been dipping in and out of the epic story of Odysseus, the hero from ancient Greek mythology. And this week, I'm going to be telling the second last installment of that tale. So if you can jump in right here, that'll be fine. I'm sure you'll pick it all up. But if you did want to go back to the beginning and start from the first episode, you can search back through the episodes. The first episode's called Odysseus, as told by Nanny Piggins, and it dropped on January 8th, 2025. Or you can go back and listen to any of the other episodes. You're going to find fairy tales, myths, legends, and mysteries. I hope you enjoy them all. Now let's get into it. Hello and welcome to Bedtime Stories with me, R.A. Spratt. All right, well, it's very gloomy weather here in Bowral. Roger the rooster is still in residence 2 doors down, but the latest drama, I was waiting to see which one of my neighbours would complain about the rooster cock-a-doodle-doing at 4 a.m. in the morning. But my next-door neighbour, so Roger the rooster lives 2 doors down, and then... Could you hear that? That was him just going then. But the neighbours that live between us and where Roger the rooster lives, they just suddenly moved out this week. So the question is, did Roger drive them out? There he goes again. Or did they leave for other reasons? And now we're concerned that the new neighbours will move in and they'll think it's perfectly normal for a rooster to be living in the backyard in the middle of town. So, yeah. Oh, he can tell I've started doing the podcast. That's 3 times in less than a minute. Anyway, so that's the dramas that are happening here in Bowral. The tickets for my Christmas show are on sale, so thank you to everyone who's bought tickets so far. That's 4 times, Roger. I'm going to have to shut the window at this rate. So today I am going to be doing... I've been talking for months, if not years, about doing a story about Diwali, the Indian holiday that's in October this year. I think it's 20th of October this year. I've been talking about it ever since I was in Singapore a couple of years ago, and I was doing a food tour of Little India, and they were just getting ready to celebrate Diwali then. So I thought, I should do a story from that mythology and how the holiday of Diwali came about. But I had to learn all about it, and which I have been doing ever since. And I finally got around to writing something. So I'm going to start off with a story about Rama, because the whole story of Diwali and where the origin of that holiday comes from, the legends of Rama and his wife Sita and his brother. So I thought I should start off introducing the characters and having a story about Rama and how he met Sita. So that's what I'm going to do. Okay, Roger has now cock-a-doodle-dooed like 8 times, so I'm going to put down the microphone and shut the window, and then I will tell you the tale. Okay, here we go. Rama and the Unbendable Bow, as told by Nanny Piggins. Michael was standing in the driveway being hosed off by Nanny Piggins. "Don't be embarrassed, Michael," said Nanny Piggins. "There's nothing wrong with falling in a ditch. We've all done it." "I've never fallen in a ditch," said Samantha. "Really?" said Nanny Piggins. "Well, that's something we must rectify. Derek, remind me to ring the school and tell them none of you can go in tomorrow. We have to find a ditch for Samantha to fall in." "But I don't want to fall in a ditch," said Samantha. "You only say that because you've never tried it," said Nanny Piggins. "If you find the right kind of ditch, preferably with a big, deep puddle of mud at the bottom, it's a lovely experience. Mud is so good for the skin. It clogs the pores up, so none of the chocolate you eat can seep out through those microscopic holes." "Some of the mud went up my nose," said Michael. "That's wonderful," said Nanny Piggins. "Wealthy people spend hundreds of dollars going to spas to be coated in mud. You got that experience for free. And I'll bet even the fanciest, most expensive day spa would never think to jam the mud right up their clients' noses. You got the real total body treatment. Well done, Michael." Michael wasn't entirely sure his health had benefited, but it was hard to argue when Nanny Piggins was trying to blast the twigs out of his hair with a high-powered hose. "Aside from the health benefits," continued Nanny Piggins, "you can find the most wonderful things in ditches." "Like what?" asked Derek. "Hidden treasure?" "Oh, no, much better than that," said Nanny Piggins. "Sometimes you can find a baby." What? Said Derek. It's true, said Nanny Piggins. I had a cousin who was found in a ditch. You're kidding, said Michael. Just when he thought Nanny Piggins' family couldn't get any more impossibly glamorous, he was proven wrong when she revealed yet another fascinating detail about one of her distant relatives. Oh, yes, said Nanny Piggins. It happened back in the ancient Indian mythology days. People were pretty astonished at the time, so it was written down, and people have been talking about it for 2,500 years ever since. You're going to have to tell us the whole story, said Derek. All right, I will, said Nanny Piggins, but we'd better get story-appropriate snacks first. I know, I'll make imati. They're deep-fried dal spirals, dipped in syrup, so they're crunchy on the outside and smooth on the inside, and just enough sugar to suck the moisture right out of your tongue. So half an hour later, Michael was wrapped in a dozen bath towels, drying off, as they all tucked into some delicious imati, which really did taste as good as Nanny Piggins said they would, so she began her tale, safe in the knowledge that the children would not interrupt for a few minutes because they were too sugar-addled to form a coherent sentence. I'd better tell you the backstory first, said Nanny Piggins, because the story doesn't actually begin with my cousin. Like so many stories from the ancient days, it begins with a man. To be fair, this man was very impressive. His name was Rama, and he was blue. What? Said Michael. He was a man, and he was blue. Was he a human man? Asked Derek. Of course, said Nanny Piggins. There were no alien space creatures in the ancient Indian story days. Oh, of course not, said Derek. Sorry, I was being silly. That's the ancient Egyptian story days you're thinking of, said Nanny Piggins. Anyway, this story all starts with a king. He was getting old and he had no children, which was particularly remarkable because he had 3 wives. 3 wives! Exclaimed Samantha. Yes, I know, it's baffling to a modern pig or human such as ourselves, said Nanny Piggins, but this was ancient India and things were different back then, so we haven't got time to judge them about it because we've got to get on with the story. So the old king made a fire sacrifice to the gods and pleaded with them to grant him a son who could be his heir. Now, it just so happened that the gods actually had some problems of their own at that time. There was a particularly nasty demon called Ravana who had been terrorizing the universe. They needed to do something about it. Vishnu, in particular, he was one of the most important gods. In fact, it was his job to be the protector of the universe. Well, he in particular wanted to get down to earth in physical form and confront Ravana. So the gods decided they would give the old king what he wanted. They would give each of his wives a baby boy. One of them actually had twins, so 4 brothers in total would be born, and that one of these babies would be an avatar of Vishnu. What's an avatar? Asked Michael. Well, it depends whether you're playing a computer game or you're living in the ancient Indian story days. In a computer game, it's an icon or a figure that represents a particular person. But in the ancient Indian story days, where the word avatar originates from, an avatar is a manifestation of a deity. It's a god come to earth in physical form. I still don't understand, said Michael. That's okay, said Nanny Piggins. Understanding is rarely necessary to enjoy a good story. So anyway, the brothers were born. There was Rama, Bharata, Laxmana, and Satrughna. They were all seriously impressive, but everyone knew right away that Rama was special, because he was blue. In what way? Asked Derek. Was he sad? Asked Boris. Did he sing the blues? No, he was literally blue, said Nanny Piggins. You see, Vishnu had blue skin, and since Rama was Vishnu in human form, he was blue too. Oh, I'm so confused, said Michael. That's okay, said Nanny Piggins. In every other respect, Rama was completely normal, except that he was better at everything than everyone else. He grew up to be handsome, strong, brave, and noble. In fact, the handsomest, strongest, bravest, and most noble man in the entire world. He was so extraordinarily wonderful that people barely even noticed that he was blue. Now anyway, one day a sage, a wise man who lived in the forest, came to the old king for help. There were all these demons in the forest who were harassing him and causing mischief. He couldn't fight them all himself, so he needed help. And since the sons were all about 16 years old at this stage, the sage asked the king to lend him a couple of his sons to help him fight the demons. And then in exchange, the sage would teach the boys how to fight with supernatural weapons, and also he would teach them all the stories and history of their people. Now, the king thought this sounded like a really good idea. Goodness knows, with 4 teenage boys in the house, he was probably happy to send 2 of them off camping for a couple of years. So Rama and Laxmana went with the sage into the forest. And as the months passed by, they had a wonderful time fighting demons, using supernatural weapons, and listening to wonderful, exciting stories, and eating cake. Cake? Said Derek. Oh, yes, the sage was very, very wise, said Nanny Piggins. So, as well as knowing how to use supernatural weapons and knowing all about the mythology of their people, he was also very good at making desserts, and he shared all this wisdom with the boys. I didn't know Indian mythology featured cake and dessert, said Derek. Oh, yes, said Nanny Piggins. If you're going to fight demons with supernatural weapons, you need to have a really healthy diet. Food is fuel, you know. It takes a lot of energy to be victorious over the forces of evil, which means a lot of cake. Anyway, once all the cakes were eaten and the demons were thwarted and driven out of the forest, it was time for the boys to return home to their father. But on the way back, they passed through the kingdom of Mithila, and there was a king with a different kind of problem. More demons? Asked Derek. No, something even more troublesome than a demon, said Nanny Piggins. This king had a daughter, and she was staggeringly good-looking. Really? Said Derek. And was she perhaps a distant relative of yours? She was indeed, declared Nanny Piggins. And was she blue? Asked Michael. No, she was pig-coloured, said Nanny Piggins. And she is my relative who was, as a baby, found in a ditch. Whoa, how did a baby come to be in a ditch? Asked Samantha. Nobody knows, said Nanny Piggins. The baby was a baby, so she couldn't tell them. One day the king was out ploughing a field. It was a ritual he had to perform, and as the plough carved out a ditch, he found the baby buried in the earth. Wow, said Michael. And that wasn't even the wowiest thing about it, said Nanny Piggins. The wowiest thing was that the baby was so beautiful, the king immediately knew she was a gift from the gods. And he was right, because Sita, that's the baby's name, was the avatar of the goddess Lakshmi. Now, you know how sometimes you see something so beautiful in nature, it takes your breath away? Like the sunset over the ocean, the first cherry blossoms in the spring, or the view from a mountaintop. And just for that one moment, you're so astonished by just how beautiful nature can be. Well, that was how beautiful Sita was. Except with her, it wasn't just a momentary glimpse. She radiated maximum level Mother Nature beauty all day, every day. And she did it from the moment the king found her at the bottom of that ditch. The king rushed home to show his wife the baby, and they adopted her as their daughter and loved her with all their hearts. And year by year, as she grew in size, Sita grew in beauty as well. And not just beauty on the outside, she was beautiful on the inside also. You mean she had beautiful internal organs? Asked Michael. Probably, said Nanny Piggins. She was pretty much the perfect woman. Except she wasn't a woman, she was a pig, said Derek. Yes, that's what I said. She was a pig. That's why she was so perfect, said Nanny Piggins. But as you know from witnessing the trouble I have with men, they keep falling in love with you at first sight, said Michael. Yes, it's a burden we Piggins women are forced to endure, said Nanny Piggins sadly. So it made it very difficult for the king to find her a suitable husband. Why couldn't she find her own husband? Asked Samantha. Because when you're so beautiful, you radiate beauty like an exploding supernova, it's not safe to go out dating men, said Nanny Piggins. You'd make their brains explode, or at the very least cause traffic accidents. Admittedly, she didn't have to go anywhere. All the princes from the neighbouring kingdoms would come to see her, desperate to persuade Sita to marry them. But the king was not impressed with any of them, so he decided to hold a Svayamvara. What's a Svayamvara? It's a competition where suitors are set a challenge to find out who amongst them is the most manly man of them all, said Nanny Piggins. Did he make them do ballet? Asked Boris. No, I'm afraid ballet hadn't been invented back in the ancient Indian mythology days, said Nanny Piggins. "Oh, how sad," said Boris. "I know," said Nanny Piggins. "They had other types of dancing, though, but the king did not hold a dancing competition." "Well, that's just silly," said Boris, "because if you want to find a husband for your daughter, dancing is the best way. To be good at dancing, you have to be strong, graceful, and have good balance, and be able to pick her up over your head and whirl her around on your fingertips." "Yes, but the king had another challenge in mind," said Nanny Piggins. "It just so happened that the king had a bow that had been given to him by the god Shiva. It was such a powerful bow that it had been used to single-handedly destroy 3 entire cities." "How did a bow do that?" asked Michael. "Did it have a flamethrower setting? Did it launch explosives?" "No, just arrows," said Nanny Piggins. "This bow was really powerful at launching arrows." But the problem was the bow was so powerful, no one in the palace was strong enough to string it. You see, you need to bend a bow to attach a string, and everyone who tried wasn't even strong enough to lift the bow up, let alone bend it. So the king announced that anyone who could string the bow would have his daughter's hand in marriage. "It sounds like he didn't want his daughter to get married," said Michael. "There's nothing wrong with having high standards," said Nanny Piggins. Anyway, the day the Svayamvara came and the princes from all around India travelled to try and string the bow. They lined up and one by one stepped forward to give it a go, but none of them could even lift the bow up. The king began to despair. Perhaps there was no man good enough for his daughter. But just then, some passing travellers arrived. It was the sage with Rama and Lakshmana. Rama in particular caught the king's eye immediately. "Because he was blue?" asked Eric. "Well, yes, he probably did notice that," agreed Nanny Piggins. "But what impressed him was Rama's athleticism, his grace, and his proud confidence." This young man was much more impressive than all the other princes who'd been trying to lift the bow. So the king invited Rama to step forward and give it a go. Rama did, and he picked up the bow immediately, as if it was as light as a feather. Then he held one end to the ground with his toe and bent the other end down as he tied the string in place. The crowd was flabbergasted. Then, to test that he had strung the bow properly, Rama held up the bow and drew back the string. And Rama was so strong that the bow snapped in half, letting out a deafening thunderclap. Kaboom! And it broke in half, and a hail of petals fell down from the sky. "Wow," said the king. "You may marry my daughter." "Huh?" said Rama. "I thought you just wanted your bow strung." "You have proven yourself worthy," said the king. "Daughter, come forward to meet your new husband." "What?" said Sita. "What do you mean, husband?" "This man has just strung my bow," said the king. "Well, that's nice for you," said Sita, "but what's that got to do with me?" "He was so strong, when he pulled the string back, he broke the bow," said the king. "So, make him buy you a new one then," said Sita. "No, I'm giving him your hand in marriage," said the king. Now, while this conversation was going on, Rama had seen Sita for the first time, and as I have said previously, she was staggeringly good-looking. So of course he fell in love at first sight, and being super brave, he boldly stepped forward and spoke to her himself. "Beautiful princess, will you do me the honour of being my wife?" "Well, I don't know. You are a very attractive blue colour," conceded Sita, "but marriage should be about more than that." "I'm also really good with supernatural weaponry," said Rama. Not interested," said Sita. "I know lots of cool stories," said Rama. "Oh, that's slightly more impressive," said Sita. "And I'm really good at making desserts," said Rama. "How good?" asked Sita. "Well, I made some imati earlier today. Would you like to try some?" asked Rama, handing her some delicious deep-fried, syrup-coated spirals. Sita tentatively took one little nibble, and as soon as that dessert touched her taste buds, she fell in love with Rama at first bite. "Really?" said Samantha. "It still doesn't sound like a good idea to marry someone you've only just met because they're brilliant at making dessert." "I totally disagree," said Nanny Piggins. But that's beside the point. You see, they hadn't just met, because Rama was the avatar of Vishnu and Sita was the avatar of Lakshmi. And Vishnu and Lakshmi had always been in love throughout all of time, and they would continue to be in love for the rest of time. So when Rama and Sita got married, this was just their first meeting in human form. They had always been married, and they always would be. Okay, that is kind of romantic, said Samantha. And so they lived happily ever after, asked Michael. Well, no. Shortly afterwards, they got banished to live in the woods for 14 years, and there was a kidnapping and an incredibly bloodthirsty war, said Nanny Piggins. But that's a story for another day. We haven't got time for that now. We've got to get up early and find a good muddy ditch for Samantha to fall in tomorrow. The end. Time for bed. All right, we'll leave that there. Okay, as I say, there are so many stories with Rama and Sita and the brothers and demons and all sorts of things. And hopefully by the time Diwali comes around in October, I will tie up that story with with the tale of how they were banished to the forest and how they emerged and the Festival of Lights and how that came to be. But anyway, I hope you enjoyed that one. It's book week next week, so I am going to try and record a story for next week. But if I get overwhelmed with book week festivities, because I'm going to be on the road all week in Canberra, it might be a replay. We'll see how we go. I'm also, as I say, going to be in Canberra. So if you are in Canberra, and I'm going to be visiting schools all week, if I'm not visiting your school, but you would like to see me, I am doing an event at the Book Cow bookstore. I think it's the Thursday. It might be the Wednesday or the Thursday. I think it's the Thursday. So if you go to Book Cow's website, you can look up the details and book tickets and come along and see me at 4:00 that afternoon. All right. Well, that's for now. Oh, yeah. And the following week, I'm going to be in Sweden. So I'm not sure what's going to happen with that week's episode either. So worst case scenario, there's going to be a couple of reruns, but hopefully I'll have a chance to record some stories for you. We'll see how we go. Okay. That's it for now. Until next time, goodbye. Hello, it's me again. If you enjoyed listening to Bedtime Stories with R.A. Spratt, it would be really helpful if you could like, subscribe, follow, and or review the show on whatever podcast platform you're listening to now. Every little one of those digital affirmations helps, and the bigger this podcast gets, the more I can justify procrastinating from my real job to keep bringing these stories to you. Thank you.